Thank you everyone for joining us. We are so excited for everyone to be here today. I'm so thrilled to have such a great panel of ESMers, all these wonderful colleagues and friends, all with super interesting and varied educational backgrounds. This is the first of a series of panels about grad school. So we have Masters of Arts today. We have MBAs and PhD ones coming up as well. And our goal, just like with college, is to demystify the process of should I go, should I not go, how to go, when should I go, where should I go, of all those types of questions. If you do go, how to get the most out of it, advice, etc. So you can learn from all of our experiences, but remember, we're just a couple data points and we can only speak from our individual experiences. Feel free to use the Q&A button or the chat to ask questions. We'll try to get to all of them, but if we don't get to any of all of them today, feel free to email info@esmprep.com anytime, and then we can connect with a relevant panelist or mentor. So with that, I'm going to quiet myself and have everybody else kick it off. So everybody is going to give kind of a 1-minute bio, college, background, grad school, why you went there, etc. So Leah, let's start with you.
Hi, I'm Leah Gilbert. I'm ESM's Client Services Manager. I have a master's in clinical mental health counseling with a focus in school guidance counseling. It's a mouthful. It's a dual degree, which is really cool. So it allows me to work with students in schools and also in private practice, if that is what I wanted to pursue. I graduated college in 2008. I did not know what to do. It was a recession, but I really loved working with kids and especially teenagers. And I had a really, really close relationship with my own college counselor in high school. So I shadowed her a little bit and I loved it. And that led me to applying to Lesley University, which is in Massachusetts, and pursuing my graduate degree. After that, I worked for 2 years in a STEM-focused high school, and then I moved out to California and I've been with ESM ever since.
Logan, you're next.
Hello, I'm Logan Hunt. I got my MA in English from Azusa Pacific University. I ended up doing my MA there because I did my undergrad there as well, and so I heard about it that way. Mainly my impetus for doing the MA in English was my interest in creative writing. And the program at Azusa was so flexible that it really appealed to me. So I'm still doing a lot of creative writing, but in the process discovered a love for teaching as well. Stayed in California, moved up to Sacramento, found ESM, and have started working as a tutor and essay coach.
Awesome. Cam?
Hi, I'm Cameron Kramer. I went to Boston University and I was an English, Lit, and Italian language and literature major. So quite conceptual. And I graduated in 2009 and then decided to pursue a master's in teaching English at the secondary level. I did that for 5 years in Los Angeles after graduating. And then I relocated actually to London with my husband in 2015 and found ESM and have been working there ever since.
Mr. Neville?
Hello, my name is John Neville. I teach and tutor test prep in math, writing, and then I also help students with test anxiety by teaching them mindfulness-based techniques. I studied mathematics at Stanford in undergrad, and then I went to trade stocks on Wall Street in the New York Stock Exchange during the financial crisis, and then went to get a master's in financial economics at Oxford to go a more academic route. And then I've been tutoring and teaching for over 15 years.
Fantastic. Doug, and then Justin, please.
Hi, everyone. I'm Doug Hunnigan. I'm an academic mentor with ESM Prep, specializing in foreign language tutoring. I was born in Connecticut, grew up in Sarasota, Florida. I graduated high school with the International Baccalaureate diploma, which kind of sparked my interest in world languages and cultures. I started college at the University of Miami and then transferred halfway through to Georgetown University to major in Arabic, language and literature. And since I was in college a few years after September 11th, I originally planned to use my Arabic to pursue a career in immigration and civil rights law. But then I realized that I really enjoyed working in the classroom as a language teacher. So after college, I taught Arabic, English, French, and Spanish in Washington, D.C. for a year, and then in Brazil for almost 3 years, and the build up to the World Cup and the Olympics there. And then I moved to the Bay to pursue my MA in Biblical Languages with the Graduate Theological Union because it combined my interests in language and religious studies. Thank you.
And I am Justin Scott. I've been with ESM for about 6 years. I grew up in Atlanta, Georgia. I went to the Lawrenceville School in New Jersey for high school, college at Georgetown, 2 in a row. I majored in English, but halfway through, I went to teach English abroad in Mauritius, which is a small island nation, about 500 miles off the coast of Madagascar. I kind of fell in love with development discussions that were had amongst me and my co-volunteers. I came back. I wrote a thesis documenting a climate change policy document that the Ethiopian government wrote, dissecting it, attacking it truthfully. I won a prize for it and decided to apply to an MA program in African Studies and did that at Yale. That was from 2011 to 2013. Thought I would then get a job in the vast network of international development, but actually went to start a PhD and then did not finish that, which is an entirely different discussion. I guess if people have questions about that, I could talk about that another time.
Perfect. Thank you all. So as you can see, huge variety of backgrounds, education, interests, passions, all different types of MAs. I think that's the biggest thing that I've been learning from all of you, which is exciting. So let's think kind of chronologically. So for attendees or for people who are watching this, who are thinking about maybe getting one of these degrees, let's start there. So Cam, can you walk us through a little bit of kind of how you walked through that decision, and then kind of an overview of the process. So, okay, for a student or a potential applicant thinking about that, where do I start? What do I need to do? How does that process look like?
Yeah, great question. So I always wanted to be a teacher since 4th grade. I remember the moment I decided. And I went off the track for a long time. I was pre-law. I actually applied to all business programs, if you can believe it, when I was applying to undergrad. And I switched to English when I got to BU and really just pursued my love of literature. And when I graduated, I still wanted to be a teacher. I knew I didn't want to go to law school. And I just sort of made the choice to apply. And I applied to BU again, really because I had been there and it felt comfortable. And I knew that my recommendations were going to be coming from there. So I thought maybe that would help with my professors being there on the campus. And I also applied to the UCs because I was back in LA at the time and thought that I would apply to those schools. So in order to start the process, you have to get letters of recommendation for sure from your professors, which is why it's so important to build those relationships in undergrad and to make sure that, especially as you take your higher level courses, you're going to office hours, making connections and being sort of a memorable student so that when you do apply for your master's, you can ask someone for recommendations and they'll remember you. You need to cultivate a resume, which frankly, mine didn't have any real professional experience on it when I graduated from undergrad. I had like a few secretarial jobs at hair salons and sort of part-time undergraduate working jobs, then a lot of like camp counselor jobs, those kinds of ongoing babysitting, like things that really showed that I liked working with kids and tutoring. And then you need to take, well, this year you don't, but under normal circumstances, you need to take the GRE. And I think at this point, it's also a good idea to take the GRE subject test. But one thing that I didn't really think about or have any idea about was what a master's in teaching degree entails versus a master's in education degree, how to differentiate those two and what your career goals are. And then also, I didn't really think about location in terms of where I wanted to end up when I finished my master's degree, right? A lot of times when especially when you're doing a program with licensure, you have to think about where you want to build your life afterwards, because I graduated from Boston University with a mass license to teach in public schools there, but I wanted to move back to California and be with my family. So those kinds of things are things I didn't know about at all going from the beginning of the process. And I would have definitely researched it more thoroughly. And other than that, obviously you have the personal statement that you need to write. And some schools do require an analytical writing sample, like a thesis or something from undergrad if you have completed that.
Awesome, thank you. Doug, what would you want to add to potential applicants who are at the pre-stage of applying?
Right. So I would say pretty much my application materials for the MA in Biblical Languages was very similar to Cameron's. I had to do the GRE, and since I was applying to a program in religious studies, the emphasis was more on the writing and verbal part as opposed to the quantitative part of the exam. And I had to have 3 letters of recommendation. My work experience wasn't as relevant. It was more about my academic study and the MA in Biblical Languages. So in the statement of purpose, I tried to give a detailed reflection on what led me to pursue that master's. And then I also just applied to PhD programs this past fall. And as Cameron mentioned, a lot of the programs, almost all the programs waived the GRE requirement. One didn't, however, which I thought was interesting. And some applications required a statement on how diversity shows up in the applicant's life and why it's important to them. I think it was my application to Stanford and Columbia that both asked for that. So something to keep in mind, that a lot of the schools aren't just looking for your academic performance or your work history, also like more information about you as a person and the type of cultures that you come into contact with.
Awesome, thank you. And for students, as we kind of narrow down in that process, as potential applicants next think about what schools and what types of programs that they're excited about, Justin, would you kick us off? How did you think about what programs were the best fit for you, and then what schools you wanted to apply to?
Sure. I think I was open to a number of different program types. I knew I wanted to do something that would prepare me to work in international development, and there were a wide variety of degree types that could have done that. Programs in international development itself, programs in economics that were geared toward that kind of work, and then what I opted for, which was the MA. But I applied to all different types, and I made my decision of what to do and where to go after I got in. So I think, it wasn't random so much as I cast a wide net, and I really was open to a number of different fields that would have prepared me for what I wanted to do.
Thank you. Leah, you want to expand on kind of picking programs and then schools, or vice versa? How you went about it?
Classic, need to unmute. So for me, it was actually a little different because I only applied to one school because there was one specific school that I wanted to attend that came at the recommendation of a college professor of mine that I had a very good relationship with after college. And she recommended it to me because of the focus on practicals. And by that, I mean, I had 2 year-long school internships, and that was really, really important for me because I feel that on-the-job learning is the best way to learn how to be a guidance counselor, or really how to learn anything. And so I really only applied to this one school. And if I didn't get in, I didn't know what I was going to do at the time, which is probably not a great thing. But I knew that I wanted to be in Boston or Cambridge. I was living in New Hampshire at the time. I didn't want to go to my local state school because I didn't like their therapeutic program, and they didn't have the dual degree that I was looking for. So that was really my process, and I found the school that fit really, really well, and that's where I ended up, and I was really happy that I did it.
Awesome. Okay, thinking about applying can, we've all been through this. It can be completely overwhelming. Cam, what was the hardest part of applying? What would
Oh
you
my
say?
gosh, I touched on it a little bit, my general overwhelm. But for me, I just didn't know. I didn't know what I didn't know. And I think that was the hardest part. I was just out of undergrad, 2009, again, recession. No, I had a really, I don't want to say impractical because my parents will say, I told you so, but my undergraduate studies were much more rooted in sort of passionate pursuits than they were in tangible skills directing me toward a designated career. And I just felt like I didn't have any direction. And then when I started this process, I didn't know really how to evaluate one program against the other. I didn't know to think about things like, professional leverage and networking and where you want to end up and what kinds of public schools you want to work for, or if you want to work for a private school. There were just so many questions I couldn't have known that I didn't know to ask. And then, the GRE, after being sort of out of the test prep swing of things for 4 years when you're in college and then having to take a standardized test like that again, it was pretty overwhelming for me. I really struggled, especially quantitatively, because of I didn't take math the whole time I was in undergrad. So I was really trying to reteach myself geometry, and it was a struggle. So I felt overwhelmed by the process. And I think that's why I only applied to sort of 2 schools, really, where I could have probably applied to 5 or 6, and cast a much wider net. I'm very happy with the way it ended up, but it was an uninformed, sort of lucky journey, I would say.
And great transition. You probably know what my next question is going to be. With all of those questions, how did you find your way? How did you find answers to all those questions?
Me again. Yeah. Well, I Googled a lot. I reached out to admissions offices quite a bit and tried to get in touch with the right people. I ended up reaching out and having a conversation with the advisor for my master's program at BU, which is why I think I ended up going there, because I built a rapport with him, actually one that I still have to this day. I graduated in 2011. So, and we're still in touch. So, he really helped me sort of navigate the process a little bit and explain to me the program. But it was really a lot of blind Googling happening during that time, and I wished, because my life was sort of unstructured, it was a bunch of different part-time jobs and trying to make things work after graduation. I didn't have a structured studying time set up for myself. It was sort of like when I could, I had like the 500 flashcards in my bag that I would read while waiting for my coffee order. So it was a little bit hectic. And I think it could have been a lot less hectic if I had gone to career services or something while I was still at BU and been sort of like set up as an undergrad. That definitely would have helped quite a bit. And also just better research. I think I was a bit chaotic in those times.
Awesome, thank you. As so many of us were. John, follow-up question. You applied to and went to a completely different type of program. What was the hardest part of applying for you?
I would say balancing test prep with a job, right? So I studied for the GMAT, but I also studied and took the GRE later after grad school when I was considering getting a PhD. So, and those are substantial tests. It's somewhere in the ballpark of 100 hours. I think I overstudied, so I think I was more in like the 150-hour range. But it was a substantial part of my year. I probably spent 4 years. 4 months studying for the GMAT, and I'm not that committed. So I also made the mistake of doing a lot of studying before finalizing a test date. So I think it can be a little bit scary to say, okay, I'm going to take this test on this date. But in actuality, it does you a great service, because then you're forced to spend your time really efficiently. So I've had friends that were waking up at 5, 6 in the morning to get their grad school their GMAT test prep done before work. Other people do it after work. Just studying on weekends, I just don't know if that's enough, because you'd have to spend so much of your Saturday and Sunday preparing for the test. So you do want to be kind of chipping away at it each day, or at least 5 days a week. So I would say that was the biggest part. And then, just deciding, am I going to study entirely on my own? Am I going to do a group class? Am I going to do, like individual tutoring? If you have the budget to do individual tutoring for test prep, it's just so catered to, your specific situation, that it definitely has those benefits. But then a lot of people, if you're really in a position where you really want to do it or have to do it on your own, it's possible to swing it. It just takes a lot of commitment and follow through.
Awesome, thank you. I think that was my biggest regret. I wish when I was in college I had taken the GMAT or the GRE. You're already studying, you're already in school mode. Whereas if you're working full time, at least in my experience, it was nearly impossible. But I didn't get I got a different type of degree, so I'm going to let everybody else here talk more. Okay, money, another big question. Financing your education, financing your graduate degree. Walk us through it. Justin, kick us off. How did you go through that process from A to Z?
I got pretty lucky. I was working in a restaurant after college. I did not have a good sound plan for how I would pay for grad school, but I also didn't really look into it. At the time, I was pretty happy-go-lucky, kind of just going with the flow. It seemed like this was a good idea to apply to schools. I ended up deciding between American in DC, where I was after graduating from Georgetown, and Yale. I knew that my decision would come down to money, even though I hadn't really looked into how it all worked. And I got really lucky. I came home from work one day and I had an email from the director of the African Studies program at Yale. And he said, "Congratulations, you got in. And also, by the way, you should apply for this scholarship because you'll get it." And I had never heard of it before, but it's a very common one in kind of international studies fields. It's called the FLAS, F-L-A-S. Stands for Foreign Language and Area Studies. It's a holdover from the Cold War, really, where the United States knew that they needed to educate smart people from their country to learn the languages from other countries where they had political interests, and to learn the cultural and political situations in those places so that they could go there and have an influence and, do the bidding of the United States. Of course, that stuff still happens. And so the the scholarship has remained even, after the end of the Cold War. So you can get this thing, and it's not that hard to get. You have to study a language that's of interest, which includes some big ones like Arabic. And for me was Yoruba, a language that's spoken in Nigeria primarily, where the United States buys a lot of oil. So you could argue that that's why, they have an interest in funding this kind of thing. But it was great. It was fantastic. Indeed, I did get this scholarship. It ended up covering everything and paying me a stipend. So it made graduate school really easy to do. And again, I've met many people at many places who have gotten this scholarship. Not every school has it anymore. It used to be more widely distributed. Now there's a smaller group of schools that still have access to it. But again, number of languages, number of regions that you could study and qualify for this thing. There's also a summer version for doing a summer program. So to me, it's amazing. Again, I lucked into it. I'm smiling because it's just such a great thing that happened in my life, and more people need to know about it. And as far as I know, the last administration didn't kill it. I just did a quick Google to make sure it's still around, and indeed it is. So I highly recommend looking into it.
Awesome, thanks. Doug, take us from there.
Sure. So Justin, not only are we both Georgetown alumni, but we're both FLAS recipients. I also got a foreign language area studies scholarship to study Turkish for a summer in Istanbul, which was awesome. So also happy to help if anybody curious about the FLAS. I can love to connect you on information about that too. During my master's program, I worked part-time for about 20 hours a week across 4 different campus jobs. 1 as a research assistant to a professor, 2 as an administrative assistant, and 1 as a building resident manager, which is like basically an RA position for grad school. And I also worked, in addition to those 20 hours per week on campus, I worked about 10 hours per week as a tutor in Spanish and French with ESM Prep. And I also took out, let's talk numbers here since that's what we're here for. I took out $40,000 in student loans, which I'm still working to pay off now. Since I received a scholarship from my school that paid for 75% of my tuition, I used most of my loans to pay for my rent during my studies. I stayed in a 1-bedroom campus apartment through my school, and since rent is so high in the Bay Area, I thought it was funny that most of my student loans went to paying rent as opposed to paying for school. So, yeah.
You gotta live while you're in school, right? Yep.
Exactly.
Okay, so we're gonna wrap up this pre-graduate school, pre-student section with, okay, we've talked finances, we've talked picking programs, we've talked how to apply. What advice would you give to someone who's starting graduate school now, who's about to go, or who's in the process of applying and hopefully starting this fall? John, you wanna kick us off?
Sure. I would say the biggest help for me in graduate school, especially at the beginning, was developing a study group. You kind of have to find the balance between picking people right away so you can start building that group cohesiveness with waiting a little bit and kind of scoping everyone out and seeing who you're going to really get along with, because it's a big decision. You end up spending a lot of time together, obviously depending on the program, but who you pick to be in your study group, I think has a really sort of lasting impact on your experience. You want to pick people that are conscientious, that will do the work, and that are also pretty not articulate, but that that they can teach and share the part of the reading, because there's so much reading done or that's assigned in graduate school that you just can't do all the reading yourself. And so it's really important to have that reading be split up, and then just meet with your team, your group once a week or maybe twice a week. So you want to pick people that are going to be fun to be around, but there are also people that are going to be able to explain to you what you were supposed to read in a way that's palatable, in a way that's where they get to the point. So I think there's just so many students that head into graduate school with that kind of with that high school or college mindset, which is I'm going to do everything myself. And in my experience, at least for my program, I can't speak for everyone else's, it just wasn't plausible by any stretch of the imagination.
Awesome, thank you. Logan, take us home for this section. What advice would you give to someone at that stage?
Yeah, I would say, the biggest thing I wish I could tell myself is just set your affairs in order beforehand. Just realizing that, like, if you're getting ready to go into graduate school, it's a huge time commitment. And so considering everything that's, going to be, making some kind of demand on your time. And so figuring out your work situation, figuring out your car, letting people in your life know, hey, this is a significant time commitment. I might not be available to hang out every Friday like before, and we're still friends. Just like taking care of all those things so that you can really focus on your studies and not have all these additional stressors like the car breaking down, your budget not being sufficient for what you thought it was going to be. And so just examining those and putting yourself in a spot where you're going to have your time and resources and everything available so that you can really focus on your studies and not have other things getting in the way.
Awesome, thank you. Okay, we're in grad school now. So during grad school, let's talk about fun, because that's another part of education, right? Cam, what were the most exciting or most fun parts of grad school for you? Or what were your greatest learnings or successes? Take it any way you want to.
For me, grad school was the first time I sort of felt like I was part of the club, the academia club, that in undergrad, you always feel like an underling sort of, but as a master's student, you feel more like a peer with your professors. Like when you go to office hours to have conversations or you're talking through your papers, it's much more of a peerish relationship. I found I felt like I was being taken really seriously, and I was really passionate about what I was learning because I could see the tangible application of the skills that I was learning towards my future career goals. I think for me that was huge because, like I said, my undergraduate degree was much more an exercise in like, conceptual activity. I was analyzing literature, reading literature, which of course is valuable, but I couldn't see the woods through the trees, right? I was just sort of engaging in this academic rhetoric, and with my master's program, I felt like I had an arsenal of skills that I was learning that would make me better at what I wanted to do. So that was a lot of fun for me. I didn't have a study group. That wasn't really the dynamic of my program, but I did have a really small cohort of English teachers within the master's program. There was like 7 of us probably. And I guess we were sort of a forced study group, but building that relationship with them and going through the whole process with them when you're doing your student teaching and you're also taking 5 classes and, doing research, there's a lot happening at the same time. And the relationships that you build with the people in your program, I think, are a special kind of relationship. So I really enjoyed the dynamic of graduate school. I really enjoyed, I was obviously really busy and really stressed out and really broke. I mean, all those things are real, but for me, it was exciting to be learning what I was learning and to be putting it towards something that I really wanted from the future. And I think that's why you should go. If you can't really say to yourself, I can't wait to be doing this and spending all my time and energy and resources doing this for the next however many years, then it's not really, I don't think, the right pursuit, because it is so all consuming, and it should be fun. I mean, it should be, I think, as enjoyable as stressful, but I can't speak for everyone else. That was just my experience.
Awesome. Thank you. Logan, what would you add to that?
Yeah, the other, I'd second all of that. I loved all those parts. A big part too, just being, that opportunity to present like original, meaningful research, to apply, to present that research at conferences, across the world. I didn't expect going into it that, my thesis paper on Faulkner, would be something that people would be interested in at this conference here, and that I could apply and share it and things like that. And so, taking a seat at the like experts table, not being asked just to like listen to other people's theories, but to, posit your own, to put your own spin on things, to make your mark in academia. It's all really enjoyable. And also just having personalized feedback from people who are experts in their fields, being able to give my creative writing samples to someone who's got a doctorate in creative writing and then say, have you heard this theory of story? Your character is just like this character and here's why. All of that kind of feedback was just amazing. And I love that part of the process.
Awesome. Okay, on the flip side, challenges. Grad school is about fun and learning, but there's also lots of challenges. Leah, what would you say were some challenges that you or your classmates faced?
I think one of the biggest things that changes from undergrad to graduate school, I worked all through undergrad, but I also worked through graduate school. And I think that when you're in graduate school, you have more maybe internships or practicals that you're doing. So you're usually a student, an intern, and you need to eat. So, because you're on your own usually. And so you're working on top of maybe an unpaid internship. And that is really challenging. It's finding that balance because you're leaving your full day internship to go work at night, but then you also have a paper due the next day. So being highly organized is really, really important. And definitely just making sure that all the balance is there. It's really, really difficult because when you're an undergrad, you may not have a job, or it's, maybe you've moved away, but you're really trying to establish your life when you're in graduate school. And that's a major, major difference, and what I found especially challenging for sure.
Thank you. Speaking of balance, John, goodness, how did you balance applying for jobs while in school or applying for jobs just after?
Yeah, this is a big question mark because the program that I was in was actually under the business school, even though it wasn't an MBA. So, and a lot of those sort of finance-based jobs were interviewing applicants in the fall. So essentially within 1 to 2 months after starting graduate school, all of us students were asked to balance the heavy workload with having to apply for jobs. I think I was 25 at the time, so I ambitiously thought that I could apply for 14 PhD programs, look for jobs, and do my master's program. That just didn't work out. So long story short, I kind of group it into 3 different philosophies in terms of jobs. If you know you want to get a job after graduate school, you could let yourself fall way behind in school and just focus on applying for jobs and really making sure that you are well set up with a great job after the program's over. You could do what most people do, which is kind of a little bit of both, right? They sort of let themselves fall a little bit behind, which takes some guts to do in this option and then the first one, obviously. And so you could spend a little bit of time applying for jobs and a little bit of time and a lot more time actually studying for school. And then you could do the third option, which is when I decided, which is what I did, which is when I realized I didn't want a PhD anymore after submitting all those applications, and I didn't have a job lined up after school, I just went home. I went home and I lived with my parents for about a month, and then found an apartment, and then just kind of found a job within a couple of months. And I think that actually took a big weight off of my graduate school experiences. If I just said, listen, I'm going to talk to family, I'm going to talk to friends and get the support that I need so that I'm not having to try to juggle all these things at the same time. So obviously I wish I had, realized that from the get-go. It's just like, I'm not going to worry about a PhD. I'm not going to worry about a job, and I'm just going to have the graduate school experience and then just figure everything out afterwards. But for a lot of people, it is the right play to just have the guts to kind of let yourself fall behind in school a little bit, just to make sure that your future prospects and your job prospects are taken care of.
That's great. Thank you. I imagine all of us were, given we all work at an education company, that does take guts, I imagine, for all of us. Okay, we've gotten to after school now. So let's talk a little bit about jobs, but kind of more on the post side. So Leah, kick us off. What are some, given everybody has such a wide variety of degrees, what were some common job opportunities that people with your degree were interested in and went after for after school?
Yeah, so because I had a dual degree, so I essentially graduated with my classmates with a dual initial licensure. So typically my classmates went one of 2 routes. They went and applied and worked for schools in guidance positions, or they went into the therapeutic route. So some of them have gone on to establish private practices. Some started in schools and have moved to private practice and vice versa. So it was a fairly flexible degree in that regard. I do have friends who have left the field entirely, or some who do things that are, typical education adjacent. Maybe it's in more of a support role, or they've established education consultancies, things like that. So it's fairly flexible. But they've done a wide variety, but typically, on track, schools, therapy, and that's mostly what my peers have done.
Awesome, thanks. Justin, entirely different kind of degree. What did some of your classmates do? What are some common job opportunities after school?
I mean, what even is an MA in African Studies, So there's an incredibly wide variety. One of my cohort mates went to med school after he did the MA. Another one went to law school. One was focused on dance when she did her MA, and that's the thing. We were all focused on such different stuff. I was focused on energy and environment, food security, policy. Again, my classmate Clara was focused on dance. Zach went to med school. Camille went to law school. We were all focused on different things, and that was the beauty of the degree, was the flexibility that it provided. But I think that that's probably typical of some of these MAs that don't have such a clear link to a profession. You know, people are going to these programs not necessarily to prepare themselves directly for something, but because I think we would all agree that this program taught us to think, taught us to critically examine sources and ideas. And we all use that every day in our lives now, even if it might not be directly related to the jobs that we do. You know, what I'm doing here has nothing to do with what I ended up doing in grad school, Nigerian oil policy, nothing. But the things that I learned helped me become a better thinker. And I think that applies to all of my classmates.
Great, thank you. And John, same question to you.
Sure, I would say one of the biggest things to keep in mind is that, I mean, obviously, if you're, getting a master's in education and teaching like Cameron, at that point, you probably do have a pretty good idea that you want to go that route. But as Justin alluded to, for a lot of graduate school programs, they're really well designed for people that don't know exactly what they want to do yet, which means that really you can draw a lot of confidence from the fact that you're completing this program that is then going to communicate to future employers that you can handle that kind of intellectual and academic rigor. So, I mean, obviously things like going to law school or getting a master's in English, people from those go into a wide variety of fields and jobs. So it's just going to make you a much better applicant or job applicant or candidate having a master's like that on your resume. In terms of what people went into, financial economics was pretty technical. So we had a lot of people going into economic research, financial research, becoming like fixed income research analysts. And then we had people who just went another route entirely. Like I had a friend who he started his own business around like clothing, clothing for young professionals, and bags and designer bags and things like that, which was obviously probably not what he thought he was going to go into. So I think it is important for people to have an open mind and just say, regardless of where I end up going, this is going to be a useful experience. It's going to build a lot of credibility for me.
Awesome, thank you. Okay, last question. I've heard a lot of you all talk about kind of what you learned in graduate school, what you focused on, what you've learned there. How do you use what you learned today in your current job, in jobs after school, and in your daily life now? Logan, kick us off.
Yeah, and so, there's definitely all of the English specifics. I wouldn't be the writer that I am, the teacher that I am, without, my MA in English and everything I learned in that. And so I use that when I'm editing essays, when I'm with students, when I'm, producing any of my own original work, that kind of stuff. At the same time, there's all of the broad skills that people have talked about that are really important in your job. I am not, at the end of my program, I was just a way better thinker than I was at the start of my program. And that's probably the thing I'm most grateful for. And I see show up in other parts of my life is just that ability to, examine sources, time management, project management, working with teams, being organized, and then just applying like a sort of rigor to your thinking that you can use in all different kinds of situations. It's something that it's like implicit throughout everything I do, but definitely shows up when you're working with different students, coming up with strategies to teach them in certain ways, trying to write an essay or personal statement in the best way possible. I think those are skills I didn't expect to use, but I'm using a lot and really grateful for.
Awesome. Cam, what would you add?
Yeah, well, like we were saying, my master's degree was pretty tactical. It was designed for me to do something specific when I graduated, and I use it all the time though in my daily life and also in my professional life. I would say that the most valuable thing I took away was actually regarding lesson and curriculum planning to be objective driven instead of activity driven. That sort of informs everything I do with my students, thinking about what I want them to be able to do by the end of any given task, whether it's, what do we want your personal statement to convey about you by the end of this versus what story do we want to tell, right? It's that's something that I think about all the time, is coming up with the objectives before I work with students, or have a meeting or do a training or anything like that. The other thing I would say is learning about learning styles, and different kinds of intelligences and learning. That helps so much just sort of interpersonally also, and thinking about how people digest and understand and retain information. Obviously with students it's invaluable, but even in conversations with friends and my husband, and thinking about how someone's mind works differently from yours. It's a cool thing to be able to consider and apply and continue to research.
Awesome. Okay. Last question for anyone, and attendees, if you wanna ask any questions, feel free to raise your hand or put them in the chat. But final words of wisdom from everyone. Keep it short. Kind of what comes to mind first. Leah, you're up first.
I would say really think about the job that you want after, and also look at, I know this is sort of dark, but look at the job prospects as well. I was not prepared to be competing against basically 200 other applicants for one guidance position. So think about that. But grad school is wonderful. Have a goal, explore your programs, find the right fit, as with anything. And enjoy the time. It's great being a student, and you're there to learn and ask all the questions that you can.
Awesome. Thank you. Justin, final words of wisdom.
It's so exciting to be able to go to graduate school. Just relish the opportunity. I think we would all love to go back and do it again.
Awesome. Short and sweet. Doug?
I would say now that I'm out of grad school, the thing that stands out to me the most are the relationships and the people that I met, more than the books that I read and the papers I wrote. So really, if you go to grad school, definitely enjoy it, like Justin said, and connect with people as much as you can.
Thank you. John?
I would say just try to make sure that your reasons for going to graduate school are both passion based and practical. All right. There's, something really magical is going to happen for you there if you're really interested in what you're studying. And like Leah said, you can really see yourself applying this to your future job. It's not the end of the world if that turns out not to be the case, but just doing your best up front will kind of help you ensure that you have a really positive experience.
Awesome. Cam, and then Logan.
Yeah, I second everything, especially what John just said. But I really took graduate school as an opportunity to push myself to my potential and see what I could achieve. Really, if I put everything into it, what would come out of it. And the relationships I built, the things I accomplished are things that I'm still really proud of to this day. And it really taught me a lot about myself and about who I am as a professional and as an adult, and how I can show up in a certain situation. So I would say, on top of everything else, to really use it as an opportunity to explore your potential and challenge yourself, to take risks and put yourself out there to do things that are outside of your comfort zone.
Yeah, and I would say, set goals, even beyond just getting the degree. What are these like personal objectives you have? Which ways do you want to grow? How do you want to develop? And then, think about action plans for reaching those goals and how you're going to do it in your program. There's a lot of room for you to carve out space in your degree to make it unique to you. And so just thinking about that beforehand, you can personalize it and reach those goals.
Awesome. Thank you. Well, we're just about out of time, but I want to send a huge thank you, obviously, to anybody tuning in, but also to all of you panelists. Thank you for your thoughtfulness, for your reflection, for answering all of my questions and more. I sure wish when I was applying to grad school that I had such an awesome team of friends and colleagues and mentors to ask questions of. So to anybody tuning in, if you're thinking about grad school, MA, MBA, PhD, any combination of letters, please reach out. We're happy to chat with you, anybody, anytime, to help you make that decision and figure out what's best for you and what's the best fit for your goals and who you are as a person and who you want to be. That's what we do. We love what we do. So happy to chat with anybody, anytime. And with that, everyone stay well, stay healthy, and thanks again for everyone's time. We'll see you soon.
Thank you.